the meeting to order. Let's call this meeting to order. Assembly Committee on Education. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Duran?
Here.
Assemblyman Flores?
Present.
Assemblywoman Gorlow?
Here.
Assemblywoman Hanson?
Here.
Assemblywoman Hardy? Assemblywoman Krasner?
Here.
Assemblywoman Marzola?
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur?
Here.
Assemblywoman Miller?
Here.
Assemblywoman Nguyen?
Here.
Assemblywoman Tolles?
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres?
Here.
Chair Bilbray Axelrod.
Here. And please note for the record that Assemblywoman Hardy is absent, excused. We do anticipate that she will be joining us. So when she does arrive, we will mark her present. We do have a quorum. And welcome to those viewing our meeting online or on YouTube, and to those who are participating by phone and video. A few housekeeping rules before we get started. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you mute your microphone when you're not speaking to minimize background noise. Committee members, please keep your camera on for the duration of the meeting to ensure a quorum is present. We do expect courtesy and respect in this committee. We don't always agree on policy, but we need to be respectful to each other in the legislative process. Reminder to folks that most items, we just figured out that one item is not on Nellis, but most of the items can be found on the legislative website through Nellis. And for those of you who are watching online in this virtual world, we do have several screens going at once. So if you see members looking away, don't take that as a sign of disrespect. They're likely looking at materials for the committee. We have one bill and work session for this afternoon. We are going to do the work session first and then move to our bill hearing. At this time, we'll open the work session and we will start with Assembly Bill 38. And I will turn it over to Mr. Robusto to go over AB 38 and the proposed amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Christy Robusto, Research Division, Legislative Council Bureau, for the record. AB 38. So as nonpartisan staff, I'm not here to advocate for issues. I'm here to assist members with the policy issues brought forward to this committee. Our first bill on work session today is AB 38, as mentioned. AB 38 is sponsored by the Assembly Committee on Education on behalf of the Department of Education and was heard by the committee on February 16th. This bill revises the membership and duties of an advisory technical skills committee appointed by the superintendent of a school district that has established a program of career and technical education and exempts such a committee from Nevada's open meeting law. It allows the superintendent to consult with certain stakeholders to perform the advisory committee's duties in lieu of appointing an advisory committee, and revises certain provisions governing work-based learning programs of school districts and charter schools. While originally there were no amendments, there has been one proposed amendment for section 2.6 with regard to adding disaggregated data as required by the report. And with that, thank you, Chair.
And thank you. And do we have someone from the Department of Ed to discuss the proposed amendment? We might have to table this bill. I think there is an appetite for the committee to see the proposed amendment and have a little bit further discussion. But if we could, if there's someone from Department of Ed that could discuss it briefly, I'd appreciate that.
We do. Christy Robusto, for the record. We have Deputy Felicia Gonzalez on the line with us who would be able to discuss the proposed amendment for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. Go ahead and just a reminder to all speakers, just go ahead and say your name before you start your testimony.
Felicia Gonzalez, Deputy Superintendent of the Nevada Department of Education. Thank you, Chair Bulbray and Vice Chair Miller and members of this committee for the opportunity to talk about this amendment. This friendly amendment is submitted by the Black Caucus and specifically by Yvette Williams. She did submit a recommended amendment yesterday to the Nevada Department of Education, and after reviewing it, and we did in collaboration decide that that one piece of what she proposed to 2.6 is 2.6 letter A is to revise the language to read the number of pupils disaggregated by race, ethnicity, and special populations participating in the work-based learning program. And as I mentioned before, that was something that we agreed upon. There were other suggested items that were proposed, but in reviewing what is already outlined in the comprehensive local needs assessment, that is a requirement for each district to complete, along with their request for an allocation of the Perkins funding. They must address specific items related to special populations and closing those opportunity gaps. At this time, if you have any additional questions for me, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. And I'm just going to go ahead and by a show of hands, are we wanting to table this, or is there a level of comfort? So show of hands or tabling it. Looks like, all right, we're going to go with more than half. So we're going to go ahead and table this. We can probably put it on work session for Thursday. We'll have time to talk about that, and we'll move on to our next one. So thank you for that explanation. And you know, I appreciate the timing, but you know, it's very difficult for folks to read over an amendment, you know, when we receive it so quick, so soon before the meeting. So, but thank you, and we'll take this up again on Thursday. So we will move to the next work session item. I think it's Assembly Bill 57. Ms. Robusto?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Apologies, I could not find my unmute button there for a second. So Assembly Bill 57 is sponsored by the Assembly Committee on Education on behalf of the Washoe County School District, was heard by the committee on February 18th. This bill suspends the current requirement that pupil growth account for 15% of the evaluation of a teacher or administrator who provides direct instructional services to pupils, and the current requirement to establish pupil learning goals until the 2023-2024 school year. There is one proposed amendment to this measure proposed by Dr. Brad Keating, Director to Government Relations for Clark County School District, and Dr. Brenda Pearson, Director of Strategic Policy Initiatives from Clark County Education Association. The amendment provides that a teacher who is subject to an agreement between a school district and an employee organization that provides an incentive to teachers based on pupil learning goals may continue to develop learning goals to satisfy the requirements of that agreement, and that these learning goals developed in this section will account for the percentage set forth in Section 2 of the bill. And the committee has the amendment on the following page. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Robusto. Before we take a motion, are there any questions on AB 57? I know we do have Ms. Anderson from Washoe County.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Assemblywoman Tolles.
thank you. And if you could just remind me if we have a comment before we take a vote, is this the time to do it, or would you rather us do it after questions and a motion? I forget the procedure. Thank you.
That's a great question, and I kind of forgot the procedure as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say that you can make your comment now.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say thank you and share my appreciation for our superintendent who presented this bill and certainly the intent of it. I also really appreciated this committee's discussion just around the student learning goals and this assessment process in general. It's something that this committee has had discussions about for several sessions, and I agree that it's something that we need to keep digging into further to get this right. And I appreciate the intent of wanting to pause, especially given the circumstances we're in, but I'm just not comfortable with the timeline for how far out it extends. So I'll be voting no, but with great respect for those who brought it forward and the intent of it.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Toles. And I'm going to go ahead and take a moment, and if I could have Ms. Anderson, if you can unmute yourself, I will. And that this has been the discussion, right? We've been talking about the fact that it does go a little further out than some people have a comfort zone. And could you, and I know we talked about this during the committee, but could you just put on the record right now what the idea was behind putting it out to 22, 23?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. Lindsay Anderson on behalf of the Washoe County School District. To address that question, I'd like to refer back to the presentation from Superintendent Dr. Krista McNeil when she indicated that the educational impact on students of this pandemic won't be solved just through one normal school year. It's going to take time for our students to recover and re-engage, and we believe this policy makes sense over the biennium. I just want to reinforce that our professional educators are committed to student achievement and growth, whatever the formal evaluation metric may be. The pause and SLO simply removes the stick over this biennium, so they're empowered to set aggressive goals for their students without the hesitation related to their formal evaluation, and assess their students specifically tailored to addressing those academic gaps instead of trying to measure their performance. So that was the thought process around the biennium in this proposal.
Thank you very much for that explanation. And I do think we will see the repercussions of what COVID-19 has done to our students for many years beyond that even. So let's hope that we can have some sort of normalcy after 2022, 2023. But with that, do we have any other questions from the committee? Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Chair. And just a quick question for clarification. And I'm probably just reading this incorrectly, but I just want to understand with the amendment, if the SLG is going to count as a part of the evaluation score for the schools that are a part of that special program, essentially, or if it would not count. I've received a number of questions from educators in my community specifically about that portion.
Madam Chair, Lindsay Anderson, Washoe County School District. I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that, but in consultation with the Clark County School District and the Clark County Education Association, it's our understanding that it will not count towards their evaluation, as we discussed, I think, during the committee meeting, but they will prepare the SLGs as part of the agreement that they have between their two organizations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure we got it on the work session discussion. Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. And were there any other questions from the committee? I am not seeing any. So with that, I will take a motion to amend and do pass Assembly Bill 57. Looking for a hand.
Motion.
Assemblywoman Nguyen has made the motion.
Motion. Amend and do pass.
And do I have a second? Assemblywoman Torres for a second. Are there any well, this would be the time that we do comments. So now I remember, but we have already done it. Any comments? We've already done that. And on the motion before we vote, we will complete a roll call vote. When the committee secretary calls your name, please say yes or no. Madam Secretary, could you please perform the roll call vote?
Assemblywoman Duran,
Yes.
Assemblyman Flores,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gorlow,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hanson,
No.
Assemblywoman Hardy, Assemblywoman Krasner,
No.
Assemblywoman Marzola,
Yes.
Assemblyman MacArthur,
No.
Assemblywoman Miller,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Nguyen,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Tolles,
No.
Assemblywoman Torres,
Yes.
Chair Bilbray Axelrod.
Yes. And the motion passes. And I will assign that floor statement to Assemblywoman Torres. Okay, let's go to Assembly Bill 105. Ms. Robusto?
Thank you, Chair. Assembly Bill 105, sponsored by Assembly Members Roberts and Monroe-Moreno, was heard by the committee on February 25th. This bill requires that any board formed to govern the Nevada Interscholastic Activities Association include at least 2 members who are parents or guardians of pupils participating in sanctioned sports, and that any advisory board to a governing board include at least 2 members who are pupils currently participating in a sanctioned sport. The amendment was proposed, there was an amendment proposed by Assemblyman Roberts that does the following. It amends subsection 2 of section 1 to change the minimum number of board members who must be parents or guardians of pupils participating in a sanctioned sport from 2 to 3, and requires that these parental board members, 1 shall be a resident from Clark County, 1 from Washoe County, and 1 from a resident of a county that's neither in Clark or Washoe, and none shall be an employee or of an immediate family member of the school district. It amends subsection 3 of section 1 to impose the same geographical restrictions and other conditions upon members of the advisory board who are pupils, and provides that for both parent and pupil board members that they shall serve in full year increments during a year in which a pupil participates in 1 or more sanctioned sports, and adds an effective date of July 1, 2022. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Robusto. Before we take the motion, are there any questions on AB 105? I know we have the bill sponsor in the waiting room, so if you do have any questions. Okay, I see Assemblyman MacArthur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this is just a point of clarification on the wording. On number 2, it says, any board formed to govern the Nevada Scholastic Activities Association. I just want to make sure when it says any board, that you can't have more than 1 board governing the NIAA. So when it says any board, I'm not sure what that means. I want to make sure it's not more than 1 board at a time.
Thank you. Assemblyman Roberts or Ms. Robusto, would you like to take that question?
Madam Chair, Assemblyman Roberts, for the record, I would refer that to legal. It was my interpretation from working with the amendment when I talked to folks was that that paragraph referred to the opening paragraph, to where if you do form a nonprofit, that it only applies to that 1 board, but I would get clarification from legal.
Ms. Robusto, I know we don't have our legal here, but I think you are able to communicate with her. So would you like to?
Certainly, Christy Robusto, for the record, my understanding and communication with legal is that that was also correct, as Assemblyman Roberts explained it when we worked on the conceptual amendment. I can certainly reach out and see if legal has any additional updates. However, that was my interpretation and understanding as well.
Well, I think that's important that we have that on the record as well. So we can move ahead. With that, I'll take a motion to amend and do pass Assembly Bill 105.
I would make a motion to amend and do pass.
Assemblywoman Nguyen has made the motion. Do I have a second?
Assemblyman Flores, second.
Thank you, Assemblyman Flores. Are there any comments on the motion before we vote? Okay, we will complete a roll call vote. When the committee secretary calls your name, please say yes or no. Madam Secretary, could you please perform the roll call vote?
Assemblywoman Duran,
Yes.
Assemblyman Flores,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gorlow,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hanson,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hardy, Assemblywoman Krasner,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Marzola,
Yes.
Assemblyman MacArthur,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Miller,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Nguyen,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Tolles,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Torres,
Yes.
Chair Bilbray Axelrod.
Yes, and the motion passes unanimously with all members present. I will assign the floor statement to Assemblyman Flores. All right, let's next
Thank you.
go to Assembly Bill 136. Ms. Robusto?
Thank you, Chair. Assembly Bill 136, sponsored by Assembly members Bilbray, Axelrod, and Cohen, was heard by the committee on February 25th. This bill revises provisions of the Revised Uniform Athlete Agents Act to prohibit an agent from providing anything of value that might affect the athlete's eligibility to participate in their chosen sport, and prohibits an agent from encouraging other individuals to act on the agent's behalf to engage in such prohibited actions. There are no amendments for this measure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Robusto. Before we take a motion, are there any questions on AB 136? I am not seeing any. Okay, I will take a motion to do pass Assembly Bill 136.
Motion to amend and do pass.
There's no amendment, just a do
Oh,
pass.
sorry, just do pass then.
Um,
And Assemblywoman Toles
Assemblywoman
second.
Nguyen has made the motion and Assemblywoman Tolles has made the second. Are there any comments before we vote? Okay. We will complete the roll call vote. When the committee secretary calls your name, please say yes or no. Madam Secretary, could you please perform the roll call vote?
Assemblywoman Duran,
Yes.
Assemblyman Flores,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gorlow,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hanson,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hardy, Assemblywoman Krasner,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Marzola,
Yes.
Assemblyman MacArthur,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Miller,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Nguyen,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Tolles, Assemblywoman Torres,
Yes.
Chair Bilbray Axelrod.
Yes. And I did not hear Assemblywoman Tolles, but I don't know if other people did.
I'm here, sorry, it went blank.
No
I'm
problem. So you are a
I'm a yes.
yes. Okay, thank you. Motion passes unanimously with all members present. Lastly, we will go to Senate Bill 83. We do have Senator Dennis here as well. Ms. Robusto, could you go ahead with that
Madam
explanation?
Chair, I'm sorry, did you assign the floor statement to?
I sure did not. The
Sorry to
the statement goes to Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to Senate Bill 83, Ms. Robusto.
Senate Bill 83, first revision, was sponsored by the Senate Committee on Education on behalf of the Legislative Committee on Education and heard by this committee on February 23rd. The bill revises Nevada's Department of Education to authorizes Nevada's Department of Education to temporarily waive or pause the requirement to administer certain federally required examinations that measure the achievement and proficiency of students if the U.S. Department of Education allows for such a waiver. If this waiver is allowed, the bill also authorizes NDE to temporarily waive or pause certain reporting requirements based on assessment results. There is an amendment proposed by Senator Dennis, which is intended to allow the NDE to conform its reporting requirements under state law to federal law during any waiver or pause relating to reporting, as the current version of the bill only allows the results of testing to not be included in NDE's reporting during the period of any testing waiver. Specifically, the amendment adds provisions in subsection 3 of section 6.7 to allow NDE to temporarily waive or pause the requirement to make public school ratings that are compliant with federal law if the US DOE grants a waiver or otherwise pauses these requirements. And the amendment, mock-up amendment to this begins on the following page. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Robusto. And I know we do have some questions from the committee, so I will open it up for questions on Senate Bill 83. And I know Assemblywoman Hanson has one, and just so I have an idea, anyone else have a question? Okay, so Assemblywoman Hanson and Senator Dennis is here available.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Senator Dennis, for being here. Just to kind of make sure I understand this correctly, I understand the bill and what we're trying to accomplish here. Just curious, though, if we don't do assessments for this period, or we do assessments, we don't have to report them? Or are we saying we're not going to do them during this period? I was just curious if we were going to have an opportunity as a state, if we have some assessment data and we don't have to report it, would we have access to it if we needed it for our own understanding in our state? Hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Dennis, for the record. Really, what the purpose of the bill is to give flexibility when we're in a situation like we are now, where if we have the feds give us the ability to waive doing the assessment because of circumstances, then we want to make sure, especially with the amendment, the amendments that we put along the way, was to try to mirror that so that at the state level we would have the same flexibility. So I don't know if I answered exactly what you were asking for. I think you were asking if we don't have to give it to the feds but still do it, do we still have access to the data? Is that correct? And I guess probably would have to ask the department, but I would think that the data would be available. I think it's how we use it where we would need the flexibility.
Thank you, and I apologize, I wasn't articulate on that. You got the gist of it. I understand the pause completely. I just need to know, are we going to do assessments even though we don't have to report them? And if we did, would we have access to that data even though we don't have to report it to the feds? That's all I'm trying to get clearance on. So
thank you, Senator Dennis, for the record. Yeah, so this isn't a mandate to not do it. It just gives the flexibility that if we get the waiver and we can choose to not do it. So it would be up to the department.
And I think that it's fair to say, and I know we have Ms. Gonzalez on the line as well, to say that if the assessments are done and the information is there, that we would be able to access that data. Would that be a fair statement, Ms. Gonzalez? I see you nodding your head in agreement. So we will have that on the record. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Okay, then I will take a motion to amend and do pass Senate Bill 83.
Also moved.
Assemblywoman Tolles has made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second from Assemblywoman Torres.
Second from Assemblywoman Torres. Are there any comments on the motion before we vote? Okay, we will complete the roll call vote. When the committee secretary calls your name, please say yes or no. Madam Secretary, could you please perform the roll call vote?
Assemblywoman Duran,
Yes.
Assemblyman Flores,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gorlow,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hanson,
yes.
Assemblywoman Hardy, Assemblywoman Krasner,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Marzola,
Yes.
Assemblyman MacArthur,
No.
Assemblywoman Miller,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Nguyen,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Tolles,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Torres,
Yes.
Chair Bilbray Axelrod.
Yes, and the motion passes. I will assign the floor statement to Assemblywoman Marzola. Okay, let's see, I just received a message. Okay, sorry. I'll close the work session on the agenda and we'll now move on to our bill hearing. So for this bill hearing this afternoon, I have allocated equal time for testimony in support, opposition, and neutral. Each person providing testimony will be allowed a maximum of 2 minutes. Staff will time each speaker to ensure everyone has given the equal opportunity to speak. Speakers are urged to avoid repetition and comments made by previous speakers. We'll limit the overall length of each testimony period to 30 minutes. If you wish to testify and you have not done so, please register online through the link provided on the agenda for the meeting. I do want to point out, I was just made aware to me that Chrome does not work for the participation. So if you are having an issue participating, you might want to try another browser like Explorer or Firefox. So just wanted to get that out there. Upon successful registration, you'll receive a telephone number, meeting ID, and instructions for joining the meeting. So that we have an accurate record and count, we ask you don't share this information, but instead encourage others to register online to participate. You may also submit public comments in writing, either in addition to or in lieu of testifying. If you don't want to testify, you still may register your opinion on any particular bill. The chair or member of the committee may request testifiers to submit documentation supporting their testimony. I am now going to open the hearing on AB 88. This bill makes various changes related to governmental entities. Assemblyman Watts, welcome to the Education Committee and begin when you are ready.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I am Assemblyman Howard Watts, representing District 15 in Central East Las Vegas. Thank you for allowing me to present Assembly Bill 88 today. I'd like to start this presentation by recognizing that we are all currently gathered on the occupied territory of the Washoe people, who served as stewards of this land since time immemorial. With the chair's permission, I'll provide some context on why I think now is the time to take action on racially derogatory naming practices. Then I'll walk you through the bill itself, as well as the amendment I've submitted, which is available to all the members as well as the public on Nellis, and then take any questions that you may have. So it comes as no surprise that Nevada and our nation have a complicated and conflict-filled racial history. From slavery and genocide to discrimination, the actions of the past ripple into the present and require us to recognize and address the lingering effects. One of the legacies that periodically needs to be addressed is the language that we use, as we look back and realize the terms that were once acceptable and commonplace are not any longer. Assembly Bill 88 looks at this language in two areas: our school identities and our place names. I'll start first with schools, since that is particularly within the interest area of this committee. After many years of advocacy by Indigenous people, we are in the midst of a major shift away from the use of stereotypical and derogatory depictions of Native Americans. The Washington football team and Cleveland baseball team stand out as a couple of major recent examples within our United States professional sports leagues. The NCAA in 2005 adopted a policy calling for the removal of such mascots in colleges, and reports that 2/3 of the roughly 3,000 have been replaced over the last few decades. In our local schools, about half of the roughly 2,000 remaining Native American mascots and symbols have been retired between 2014 and 2020. Legislatures and education boards in several states have also taken action to address this issue. Right here at home, Hey Reb was recently retired at UNLV, my alma mater. Having evolved from the Confederate wolf Beauregard and evoking elements of the mountain man, Hey Reb troubled many community members, including and especially Native American students and alumni. Next, I'd like to shift our attention to place names. In 2015, a group called Vocative cross-referenced every term in the racial slur database against the 2.2 million official place names tracked by the US Geological Survey and found more than 1,400 places containing racial slurs within their names, including 60 here in the state of Nevada. Local examples include Negro Head Peak, Dago Spring, Chinaman Diggings, and several locations that use the word squaw. A few months ago, just across the border at Lake Tahoe, the Alpine Meadows Ski Resort committed to change its former name of Squaw Valley after talking with Native communities and learning about its offensive nature. The word squaw is likely a corruption of an indigenous word for female reproductive organs or females, and was used as a derogatory term, sometimes to describe men who do, quote, women's work, or people who married indigenous women. The term is also sexualized, with squaw tit here in Nevada as one example, and that is a place name that is still on the books today. Assembly Bill 88 would make it clear that the State Board on Geographic Names should reach out to local communities and recommend changes to more appropriate names. I'd also be remiss if I didn't note that many of these places had names that were given to them by Paiute, Shoshone, and Washoe people long before the arrival of Europeans and their descendants. For one example, we can look at Doso Doyabi, the new name given to the second highest peak in Great Basin National Park right here in Nevada. Before renaming, it was the state's sole Confederate monument, having been, quote, officially named after Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. But in consultation with Shoshone tribal members, they renamed it to Doso Doyabi, which means White Mountain, which was the name that it had been called before receiving that so-called official name. I know that some of the members on this committee and of this body may be concerned about the concept of erasing history, and I just have to respectfully disagree and address that up front. This bill creates a process and a record of the decisions on these issues. And in that regard, I think AB 88 is in fact making history. It causes us to take a second look and a deeper look at things we often take for granted, and to educate ourselves about all of our communities and about our history. Ultimately, I believe we can find words and symbols that honor the stories of these places and institutions, while also honoring the diverse cultures and communities that call Nevada home. So with that, I will briefly walk you through the provisions of the bill as well as the amendment, and I'll walk you through both as we go through. Section 1 of this bill requires that the Board of Trustees for each school district and the governing board of each charter school within this state adopt a policy that prohibits the use of names, logos, mascots, songs, or other identifiers that are racially discriminatory. In particular, as noted in my remarks, we're looking at offensive depictions of Native Americans, but the language is broader to cover other potentially offensive depictions as well. Should a school choose to use an identifier that's associated with a federally recognized Indian tribe, the governing body must obtain permission for the use of this identifier from that tribe. This preserves tribal sovereignty and again ensures that all these communities are involved in the discussion and the decision-making process when these issues are being considered. Section 2 of the bill has to do with allowing the Board of Regents to adopt a similar policy. That section is being stricken in the conceptual amendment that I have provided. Since I first requested this bill, UNLV has retired the Hey Reb mascot officially. which addresses one of the reasons that I wanted to ensure that the board was included within this legislation. And additionally, the Board of Regents already possesses the ability to create such a policy on their own if they'd like. They do not need statutory authority to do so. I believe that there's no problem with the Rebels name at UNLV now that the problematic mascot is no longer associated with it. And I believe this amendment will also eliminate the fiscal note on this bill submitted by NSHE. Hopefully they can testify later on and provide some clarity on that. Section 3 of this bill establishes a policy mandate for the Nevada State Board on Geographic Names to recommend new names for landmarks containing racially derogatory language. To note the other component of my conceptual amendment that removes the requirement to consider people with a racially discriminatory history under both sections 1 and 3. And the purpose of that is really to focus this on the most egregious language and symbols in our state. I know that there's ongoing debate about people that things are named after, with the renaming of the airport in Las Vegas being one major example. And I think those are conversations that are certainly worth having. For the purposes of this bill, I really wanted to focus on creating a framework and prioritizing addressing the most egregious words and symbols. Section 4 sets the effective dates for schools to have these policies in place. And my conceptual amendment removes the requirement for the Board on Geographic Names to submit its recommendations by a date certain. In conversations with some folks involved with the board, it's a volunteer-driven body. They meet infrequently and require community input in order to undertake this process and make their recommendations. And we want to provide space for that to happen without creating a kind of arbitrary date for them to get it done by. So really that covers the provisions of the bill. I believe our state will only become stronger and serve as a moral example to others by coming together and confronting and addressing these historical inequities. I ask for your support of AB 88, and with that, I'm happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Assemblyman Watson. I do have a few questions, but I will open it up to the committee first. Do the committee members, looking at hands? Assemblyman MacArthur, you're very talkative this meeting.
Yes, I know. I just have a point of clarification on here, and I don't know exactly what it's supposed to mean. In section 1, number 1, we're talking about all the schools and universities and that sort of thing, but you specifically mentioned gifted pupils. Why are we pulling that out? I don't understand that. Why are we mentioning them specifically?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman. I appreciate that, and I'd also defer that question potentially to legal counsel. So I wanted to make sure that it applied to every K-12 institution in the state, and that's how the bill came back. So it includes the school districts, as well as the governing bodies for charter schools, as well as the university school for profoundly gifted pupils. So that wasn't something that I specifically asked for. I just wanted to make sure that it included every K-12 institution that is within the public purview.
And
okay, so it had to be mentioned specifically then, I guess. Huh?
Well, and I'm curious about that as well, actually. I'm wondering if we have a university school for profoundly gifted pupils in the state of Nevada. I see some nodding. I see Assemblywoman Hanson is raising her hand, and Assemblywoman Tolles is nodding her head in agreement. So Assemblywoman Hanson, would you like to speak?
I think that would be the Davidson Academy up at the university that's housed on that campus. I think I heard this. It's a charter, a university charter there for gifted students.
And must not fall in the purview of the other things that were mentioned. So just to cast that wide net. So thank you for that. See, I was thinking it was like Hogwarts or something, but oh well. Does that answer your question, Assemblyman MacArthur?
Yeah, I think I knew the intent. It's just the way it was worded here. It looked like they were picking out gifted pupils for some reason, but I think we're fine.
All right. Do we have other questions from members? I'm not seeing any. So I was wondering, Assemblyman Watts, if you could explain to me, could you tell me what the makeup of the Nevada State Board of Geographic Names is? I had never heard of that board before. And you said they meet infrequently, but what is the makeup? And is it appointed? And who exactly is on it? You are on mute, Assemblyman Watts. You hear me?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I had a internet glitch. It's becoming the norm these days. Let me pull this up for you. So the Board on Geographic Names consists of one representative selected by the following agencies: the Bureau of Mines and Geology of the state of Nevada, faculty from UNR, faculty from UNLV, Division of the State Library, Archives, and Public Records of the Department of Administration, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, the Nevada Historical Society, the BLM, U.S. Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. Park Service, the Intertribal Council of Nevada, or any successor organization. Additionally, I believe it's Assembly Bill 72 is seeking to add an additional representative, and that's under consideration during this legislative session from the Nevada Indian Commission. So the goal is to have representation from folks that are involved with the naming of these various places and landmarks. And very briefly, to describe how this works, naming or renaming things is a decision that's made by the U.S. Board on Geographic Names. And so what our state board does is it engages with members of the public in our community and makes recommendations. But usually when those recommendations are well-founded and well-reasoned and have gone through that community process, they are then adopted by the U.S. Board on Geographic Names, and that's what makes a change effective. Madam Chair, I believe you're on mute.
Now I did. Thank you for that clarification. It has just been a day today. Thank you for that information. I believe that Vice Chair Miller had a question as well.
I do. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Assemblyman, for bringing this legislation forward. I can tell you there's many people that were part of a working group last year during interim committee that had recommended this. So they will be ecstatic to know that this is happening. My question for you is, and I guess I'll preface it by saying that, you know, there's many of us who, once we know that a term, a phrase, a custom, a logo, or whatever it is offensive to a particular group of people, we just automatically accept it and stop. You know, it's kind of that, oh, I had no idea. I apologize. I don't want to offend people, and we just automatically stop. But we know that there's still many people out there that feel entitled and emboldened and really feel like it's their right to continue using phrases and mascots and names. And that's always curious to me. I'm always curious why you would want to continue doing something when you know it hurts other people. But with that being said, I know that for some people, there's some people that it's enough to say, well, this community or the Native Americans or this group, or because again, this isn't just isolated to Native Americans, as we know, that a group came forward and this is offensive and would like it changed. There's the part of the population that will just accept that and agree and say, yes, let's do it and move forward. And yet there's the part of the population that will resist it. You know, a lot of times people say, what are you doing? Trying to erase history, as if we want to hold on to things that hurt and traumatize others. So with that, I guess my question is with this, have you considered any type of like education or informational piece so that when the boards or the groups and decisions are made or requested to change things, that the community actually understands why? And just as you had explained in the beginning, you gave us some definitions of what this term means and why it's so hurtful and offensive. And so with that, I just wonder if that's a piece that you considered or would consider, so that there's some type of communication or information going out so that people can really understand what the origins of that word or mascot or phrase or name is and why it's so hurtful and offensive.
Thank you so much for the question, Vice Chair. Assemblyman Watts, for the record. You know, that's one of the main reasons that I'm trying to bring this bill forward and why it's structured the way it is. And the goal is to create a policy and a process, because we've seen this come up before. To give a couple examples, we've discussed Hey Reb. There's also the Western Warriors High School down in Las Vegas. And, you know, we know that these issues exist across the state. But every time this gets brought up, it falls to whatever entity is in charge to try and figure out how to navigate that process. So I think this, bringing this bill forward and bringing attention to this helps provide the start of some of that education, as well as requiring all of these entities to develop this policy so that they think through, okay, how does somebody come forward and bring up an issue that they find something to be problematic, insensitive, offensive? How do we negotiate that? How do we gather input? How do we make that decision? How do we communicate that decision? And so I think having that policy put into place will create a better environment when these issues get brought up, to have a community dialogue, to educate everyone, to bring everyone together and get those perspectives. And, you know, I think that is the better approach compared with trying to create something that just makes a blanket decision on removing every type of word and trying to lay out which specific words need to be removed, or creating a blanket ban, you know, looking particularly at Native American mascots. We have a school in Owyhee that's located on the Duck Valley Reservation. And I don't want, if they have imagery that they, and a logo and identity that they support, I certainly don't want to step on their sovereignty and their identity and tell them they cannot use that. Similarly, Elko High School. Elko's mascot is the Elko Indians, and they actually have communicated with the Elko Band of the Timuac tribe, who has written a letter expressing that they feel that the way that the school portrays that identity is not offensive. And so, again, I think this policy strikes that balance where it allows some local control and discretion, and just is seeking to put a policy in place that means everyone has to take a close look about how these may be perceived by other people, and have that discussion and come to a decision in an open, transparent, participatory way.
And thank you for that, Assemblyman. I think that that's the key, is that empowering the actual impacted community and community members, that they are the voices that need to be heard and responded to. And so I appreciate your response to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And do we have other questions from the committee? I am not seeing any. So with that, we will move on to testimony in support, opposition, and neutral of AB 88. If you are on the line, please remember to clearly state and spell your name and limit your testimony to as close as you can to 2 minutes. We will begin in support of AB 88. Staff from Broadcast and Production Services, please add the first caller.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on AB 88, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 130, please press star 6 to unmute. Caller with the last 3 digits of 130, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINE SAUNDERS, here on behalf of the Progressive Leadership Alliance in Nevada and the Nevada Immigrant Coalition in support of AB 88. We first want to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing this important piece of legislation forward. 2020 was a year of reckoning like none before, where hundreds of thousands of people across the nation took to the streets to demand actions to address systemic racism after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And yet terms in our state like rebel still retain a connection to overt racist systems of oppression and the Confederate generals, symbolic of white supremacy culture, as they serve as a reminder of the Civil War and slaveholding South. And Indigenous mascots are a form of cultural appropriation, the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of the customs, practices, and ideas of one people or marginalized society, typically by a more dominant people or society, often presenting stereotypical images that desecrate traditions. Indigenous communities are also the original stewards of this land. We must look to change names that serve as acknowledgement of those who removed Indigenous people from their lands and erected non-native and inappropriate names for those areas. In addition, there are real impacts of racial stereotyping and accurate racial portrayal, particularly in a place of learning. They have found to be harmful to the self-esteem and development of Black, Indigenous, people of color communities. In fact, the American Psychological Association called for an end to using Indigenous mascots over 15 years ago because of the concern for students. In the past year, brands like Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's, Cream of Wheat, Land O'Lakes, and even Disneyland have all committed to making changes to their racist imagery. It is long past due for Nevada to acknowledge our past and make amends to the diverse population that calls Nevada home. We ask that you pass Assembly Bill 88. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Saunders, and we'll take the next call in support.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 486, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, Alexander Marks, MARKS, with the Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. NSEA wholeheartedly supports AB 88, prohibiting the use of any name, logo, mascot, song, or other identifier that is racially discriminatory in Nevada schools. At our 1991 Representative Assembly, the National Education Association adopted a new business item to discourage the initiation and continued use of prejudicial and derogatory names and symbols of ethnic groups for schools, sporting teams, and mascots. In the last 30 years, we have reaffirmed this position on numerous occasions because educators have long known the use of racially discriminatory language and symbols in schools is wrong and contributes to a hostile learning environment for many students of color. 20 years ago, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights issued a statement calling for an end to the use of Native American images and team names by non-Native schools. The statement reads, quote, "The stereotyping of any racial, ethnic, religious, or other groups when promoted by our public educational institutions teaches all students that stereotyping of minority groups is acceptable, a dangerous lesson in a diverse society. Schools have a responsibility to educate their students. They should not use their influence to perpetuate misrepresentations of any culture or people. We urge the support and passage of AB 88. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Next caller in support.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 247, please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Will Adler. I am representing Silver State Government Relations, representing Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe would like to add their names in support of AB 88. It is a long overdue that we've developed a process to rename some of the improperly named facilities around the state. And essentially, this is a process that can be done respectfully and in a measured fashion that I think we can get a lot done in a positive fashion in the state of Nevada. Thank you for your time and thank you for supporting this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Adler. Next call in support.
Caller with the last three digits of 181. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Brian Melendez, BrianMelendez, Chair of the Nevada Statewide Native American Caucus. I'm grateful to this committee for working for all Nevadans and Assemblyman Watts for his energy and consideration on this vital issue. The Nevada Statewide Native American Caucus supports Assembly Bill 88 as a moral step towards justice and education. As an Indigenous leader of the state, I am intimately aware of the power of symbolic and structural racism and the harsh impacts that these institutional applications have on our identities as tribal people and future government-to-government relations. This is not the first time that tribal leaders, community organizers, and advocacy groups have spoken against racist mascots and monuments or derogatory place names. As Indigenous leaders from across the nation mobilize around these particular issues, we ask for your mindful consideration and care. More importantly, we ask that you listen and acknowledge what constituents of color, your constituents, are saying on this matter. As it stands, these historic and symbolic vestiges stem from a place of hate and fear and have no place in a productive and prosperous future. To be clear, our position is not simply a fickle sensitivity to subtle prejudice, but a call to rebrand what human dignity looks like in Nevada for all people of color. There can be no healing without reconciliation, and now more than ever, we must confront racism where it sleeps. As leaders, you have the power and authority to make right these historical wrongdoings. We hope that you will pass this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you for the testimony, Mr. Melendez. Next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits of 728. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, this is Marla McDade Williams, MARLA MC, capital DADE, Williams, WILLIAMS, with Strategies 360, speaking today on behalf of the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. The Reno Sparks Indian Colony would like to go on record in support of AB 88. In 2014, Chairman Arlen Melendez joined other leaders throughout Indian country to speak against racially offensive mascot names. At the time, the National Congress of American Indians adopted a resolution noting, quote, the limited and sparse representations of Native Americans in the media and popular culture comprise a significant portion of what children learn about Native people and thereby impact their identity formation by reinforcing stereotypes about Native cultures from the past and present, end quote. On a personal note, I went to Elko High School, whose mascot is the Indians, as Assemblyman Watts discussed. While someone from the tribe may have submitted a letter saying the name is okay with the tribe, it isn't necessarily okay with everyone in that community. There has certainly been some awareness there because at some point the caricature Indian head was changed to be a more respectful representation of a Native headdress. But that doesn't change the fact that in representing the Indian, there are the offensive chats and sometimes flat-out racist comments thrown at the athletes. Growing up, I constantly heard talk about how the high school was the Indians, but there wasn't an Indian on the team, and it wasn't for a lack of talent. I was a Native student athlete, and I had to compartmentalize and separate myself from the jeering about my culture. As a student, as a student, you're powerless to do anything else, and you have a mixed sense of pride for your school. In closing, we want to extend our thanks to Assemblyman Watts for bringing this legislation forward and bringing attention to these issues. We agree with the closing sentence of the letter submitted by the Las Vegas Indian Center that mascots reinforce stereotyping and prejudice. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. McDade Williams. It's good to hear from you. Next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits, 094. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, for the record, my name is Alyssa Garule, ALYSSA
Gurule, and I am here on behalf of Battleborn Progress. I'm an intern at Battleborn Progress and a student at the College of Southern Nevada. We support AB 88 because it is past time that we prohibit the use of racially discriminatory identifiers on school property and other geographic locations. The use of them not only perpetuates racial stereotypes, but also has psychological consequences. We must make our schools and other geographic features a welcoming environment for anyone who sets foot on these properties. A welcoming environment does not include a name, mascot, or symbols that are racially derogatory. Nevada is currently the 9th most diverse state, and it is essential that we begin making these changes. We believe that passing AB 88 will be a right step in the right direction towards confronting systemic racism and making everyone feel like they are accepted in Nevada. Thank you, Assemblyman Watts, for bringing this legislation forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gurule. And next person in support.
Caller with the last three digits of 112. Please press *6 now to unmute. You will have 2 minutes. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record, and you may begin.
My name is Natalie O'Neill, Natalie, O''Neal. I am the treasurer for the Nevada Statewide Native American Caucus, also a member of the Fort Peck Assiniboine Sioux Tribes of Montana, living though in Las Vegas for years now, and also a parent of a child that attends Clark County School District. I'm also an educator for college campuses here locally in Las Vegas for healthcare education. I just wanted to speak to thanking the committee for taking this issue up in support of AB 88. As a former Division I Native American basketball player, I have firsthand experience with the derogatory impact that Native mascots have on not only athletes, but those who are compelled to think that it's okay to have a Native mascot, therefore it normalizes behavior and stereotyping of these racial derogatory meanings. I have an experience when I went to University of Arkansas to play. At that time, there were the Indians, showed up in full headdress, knew that there was an identified Native American player on the court that night. That was me. And it was really hurtful to see them with signs of things like squaw, go home back to the reservation. By the way, my university was a University of Idaho, nowhere, specific to any Native American mascot at the time. And it was just very hurtful at a very young age. And so I took that with me. And now as an adult, I have, taken that forward for the last 20 years to make sure that I ensure and educate anyone that's interested in hearing. It's not just bringing up racial mascots. Let's be honest, it's Native American mascots. There is no such thing, and I'll go ahead, and if you find this offensive, then you're going to put yourself in your shoes. There's no such thing as, let's say, the New Jersey, Jews. There's no such thing as the University of Nevada. We could go on and on and on about different ethnic groups that I wouldn't go there because it would be derogatory and demeaning. So for people to say that it's okay to use the term Indian, especially if you got one letter from one individual from a tribe, that doesn't represent any. So I urge you to please consider this bill and support, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits 202, please press *6 now to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. We'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Paige Barnes, Paigebarnes. I'm here today representing the Nevada Association of School Boards. We support AB 88, the process established in the bill, and the intent to respect all of Nevada's communities. We want to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing the bill forward and encourage all of your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Barnes. Next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits of 166. Please press *6 now to unmute. Caller with the last three digits of 166. Please press *6 now to unmute. Go to the next caller. We can come back.
We have the next caller. Did we lose broadcast? Okay, it's time to go home. I'm just kidding. Let's give them a moment. I think we might have lost you, broadcast.
Member of the Bishop Paiute Tribe, but I'm here today as the Executive Director of Native Voters Alliance Nevada. We are in support of Assembly Bill 88. It is long overdue to remove the imagery, names, and other identifiers that have shamed our people. While many people have assumed that any representation is good and that we should be honored by these things, that cannot be further from the truth. This is harmful. Our children should not have to see these and wonder why their people are seen as no more than vicious savages or squaws. Not to mention the disservice this does to non-natives that can't imagine a native person that isn't reminiscent of a John Wayne film. We need more accurate representation, and getting rid of these relics is a step in the right direction. Thank you, Assemblyman Watts, and thank you, Madam Chair.
And I'm sorry, we missed the very beginning of your testimony. Could you say your name? You still missed it. All right. Sorry about that to the folks trying to take notes. We'll move on to the next caller.
Members of the committee. Caller with the last three digits of 166. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes. Chair Bill Ray Axelrod and members of the committee, my name is Misty Haji Sheikh. That's MISTY HAJI capital SHEIKH. I'm a volunteer member of the Sierra Club Legislative Committee and leader of the Justice, Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion efforts. On behalf of the Sierra Club and our more than 30,000 members and supporters statewide, I am speaking in support of AB 88. Sierra Club's mission is to explore, enjoy, and protect the planet. We want all people to feel welcome in our shared public spaces. Too often in the past, leaders of European descent used names that disrespected indigenous cultures or insulted other races and ethnicities unnecessarily. Over the last year, our country has seen the extreme pain that comes from persistent systematic racism and is an antithesis to our mission. We aim to replace the names that were chosen to honor people in the past, despite their racist tendencies, in respect for ways our criminal justice, education, and healthcare systems fail communities of color at far greater rates than European Americans. We wish to avoid the insensitive naming of a school mascot or mountain peak. We appreciate AB 88 for the process it sets forward to heal the sting of racist names in a variety of ways they appear in Nevada at the broad scale necessary. We at Sierra Club are working hard to make changes so everyone of all ages, ethnicities, disabled or able-bodied, genders, religions, special needs, LGBTQ+, and places of origin are included, welcome, and comfortable. We hope that this will be adopted by others so that schools and public buildings will be included. We see our Nevada as a model for the country. There is some opposition from teachers that it costs money to make these changes and that the money should be spent on education. We understand their point. I wish to point out that making these changes is long overdue, and also making these changes is a learning experience, both in the classroom and outside the classroom in perpetuity. Replacing racist place and mascot names will better appeal to people who visit this place we call home. For these reasons, we urge you to support this bill. Thank you for considering it. Thank you, Mr. Watts, for bringing this forward, and thank you, Chair, for listening. I appreciate your vote on this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Haji Sheikh. And do we have another caller in support?
Caller with the last three digits of 398. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Assembly Education Committee. For the record, my name is Sabra Newby, SABRA-NEWBY, representing UNLV. We applaud Assemblyman Watts for bringing this bill forward in the spirit of equity and inclusion
These goals are shared by President Whitfield and UNLV, which is why Hey Reb was officially retired earlier this year. I wanted to make a statement that with the elimination of NSHE from this bill in the conceptual amendment that Assemblyman Watts has offered, the fiscal impact submitted by UNLV through NSHE can be eliminated. Again, we thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing this forward in this important time to address some of the wrongs of the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newby. Next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits of 155. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, CHRISTI-CABRERA. I am the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Nevada Conservation League, and NCL is here in strong support of AB 88. We are especially supportive of Section 3, which requires the Nevada State Board of Geographic Names to recommend changes to the names of geographic features or places that are racially discriminatory. Broken and racist systems must be addressed before we can have a healthy and just environment. And it is past time to change the offensive names of public lands and spaces. Our public spaces and historic sites tell a story about Nevada's history and should reflect a narrative that is inclusive of communities who have made positive and lasting contributions to our great state. While our country continues to reckon with our racist and bigoted past, this is an important step Nevada can take to rightfully reclaim and retell our history in a manner that honors those who came before us and allow our country to heal from the hurtful and dangerous narratives of the past. The outdoors are and should be a place for everyone, and all people should feel welcome across every part of our state. We are grateful to Assemblyman Watts for bringing this bill forward, and we urge the committee's support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cabrera. Next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits of 672. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Teresa Melendez. Teresa, Teresa, Melendez, Melendez, and I'm the Vice Chair for the Nevada Statewide Native American Caucus, and I'm calling in support of AB 88. There's already been so many important things that have already been shared. I also wanted to talk about the importance of the mascot issue and bring to folks' attention the study created by or conducted by Illuminative. They're a Native nonprofit that works for social justice, specifically on Indigenous issues, and they have a project called Change the Name. And they conducted a national survey, so we finally have some national data reinforcing all the important correct things that the previous callers have identified, that Native mascots don't honor Native people, Native mascots, teams' names, and imagery are racist. We finally have scientific studies proving that Native mascots demonstrate direct negative impacts on Native Americans, and that these mascots affect, reflect, and or reinforce stereotypes. One thing I want to add to that is that these mascots also cause higher rates of depression, suicide, ideation, self-harm, and substance abuse in Native youth, and increased discrimination in schools against Native students. Racist mascots increase negative stereotypes of Native people and create the false perceptions of Native people as aggressive. You can find more on that study if you Google it. But I also just wanted to speak to the perspective as an Indigenous person of this country, not from these lands. But when we're talking about correcting the renaming things and recognizing our history, we're recognizing that the Indigenous people of this land have already named the lakes and the mountains and the valleys, that their ancestors are from these soils. And I've always been here, and I think that's my time. Thank you, Assemblyman Watts. Appreciate the bill.
Thank you, Ms. Melendez. Is there another call in support?
To the callers who have just joined, we are currently testifying in support of AB 88, and you may press star 9 now to join the queue. Caller with the last three digits of 050. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 050. We cannot hear you. Is your phone unmuted?
My name is Mercedes Krause, MERCEDES KRAUSE. I am calling in favor of this bill. Thank you so much, Assemblyman Watts and the esteemed committee, for hearing our testimony on this deeply emotional topic. I think you've heard, how emotional many of the speakers are today. I feel the same way. I wear many hats, but today I speak as an Indigenous woman, mother, neighbor born and raised in Nevada, and as an educator under the umbrella of the organization Indigenous Educators Empowerment. I'm so emotional to finally hear this bill. We've been waiting so long for it to happen, many of us in the community. So I want to make my statement very clear. I implore you to follow good community relationship standards, decency, and the lead that extensive qualitative and quantitative research leads us to, which is the retirement of these gross images and the names where they're found in our state. I want to just reiterate what others have said. There is no honor in these names. If we want to respect and get to know the culture of our 27 tribal neighbors here in Nevada, we need to do this by getting to know them and changing these gross images. The things that we see, these caricatures, are gross misrepresentations of my Plains culture, and they falsely assume that they represent people in Nevada. There's no representation there. I want to say that we're still here, and we're so much more than a caricature. Please see us as neighbors, allow us to feel respected, and protect all of the children in our communities from the documented harm caused by misrepresentations of Native American people. I also want to share the official statement of the National Congress of the American Indian. They state, rather than honoring Native peoples, these caricatures and stereotypes are harmful, perpetuate negative stereotypes of America's first peoples, and contribute to a disregard for the personhood of Native peoples. These caricatures, as we've heard from other speakers, would never be accepted for any other community. We're still here. Please do not reduce us to a stereotype, and even worse, say that it's an honor. Even students like my own children who did not go to a school with mascots had to face them during playing school sports and other district-wide events where all the schools were represented. So you have to realize that these mascots affect more than the students who study under them. I'll skip through the research, but I would implore everyone to look. You can very easily look up the American Psychological Association statement and look at the lengthy list of research and resources and educate yourself on the topic. It is truly harmful. And I really want to ask you to lean with your other neighbors in the community, organizations such as Nevada State Education Association, UNLV Native American Alumni, UNLV Native American Student Association, CSN Native American Alliance, and also note that the National Indian Education Association actually wrote a letter to our superintendent when it was Skorkowski asking for the removal. Thank you for your consideration, and please consider what you've heard today. Listen to our hearts and the research as you make your decision with your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Krause. Do we have more callers in support?
Caller with the last three digits of 495. Please press *6 now to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
For the record, I'm Shay Backus, Backus. I'm here in support of AB 88. While I'm a third-generation Nevadan, I'm also an enrolled member of Cherokee Nation. As a child, I spent my summers on my grandparents' ranch outside of Tooele, Oklahoma. This 80-acre ranch was land that was allotted through federal policy of dividing communally held Indian land. It must be noted that this land was not where my ancestors originated, as the Cherokees were a part of the U.S. efforts to relocate tribal members under the Indian Removal Act to Indian Territory. While this law required the government to negotiate removal treaties fairly, voluntarily, and peacefully, it was frequently ignored, and Native Americans were forced to vacate lands that they had lived upon for generations. I want to thank Vice Chair Miller for highlighting the need for ongoing discussions about term usage that appear derogatory. For years, Cherokees, one of 5 tribes commonly referred to as the 5 civilized tribes. The term has been institutionalized in federal government policy, but it really is not okay, as it is a form of colonization and control. The 5 nations themselves have been less accepting of it. I'm here to testify in support of AB 88 because with all of the ethnic stereotyping set forth about Native Americans through use of mascots and other symbols, it is ultimately promotes a misunderstanding, implicit biases, and prejudice, which contributes to other problems faced by Native Americans. With its ethnic stereotyping, one does not really understand the cultural history of each Native person that they may meet. While Nevada has 27 tribes within our state borders, there are numerous tribal members from tribes located outside of our great state who reside in urban areas and have stories about their family, as I do. With that, I would like to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing this bill forward, and I would ask this Committee on Education to support AB 88 so that we refrain from using state funding to promote racial injustice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our former colleague, Ms. Backus, for calling in. Do we have any more calls in support?
Caller with the last 3 digits of 018, please press *6 now to unmute. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits, 018, you are unmuted on our end. Is your phone perhaps muted?
It was, yeah. I'm good now.
We can hear you now.
Good
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Ethan Doig. That's ETHAN, D as in dog, OIG, and I'm Senior Advisor for the Nevada Native Caucus. First, I want to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing this critical piece of legislation forward. It's taken years worth of discussion and dialogue, not just within tribal spaces in the state, but across the country. There's been a lot of advocates, allies that have been working on this issue. So I want to appreciate him in this moment for bringing it forward. And I want to appreciate the consideration from this committee on this issue. Nevada is home to 27 unique tribes and colonies and has one of the largest growing urban indigenous populations in the country. Visibility is critical to beginning the hard work of overcoming the generational trauma of erasure and genocide. These racist and derogatory place names, monuments, mascots, songs, sounds, they reinforce this erasure and emboldens the beneficiaries of Native invisibility. So our caucus, you've heard from many people from our caucus and other organizations, we would like to urge you to support this legislation and be active participants in not just your own education, but the education of others. And that's really what this bill is about, is it brings Native peoples forward in a healthy way, but it also empowers people to educate on these subjects that are oftentimes relegated to caricatures and misrepresentations. So thank you for your consideration. Thank you for your time. And I would appreciate your support in righting these historical wrongs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any other callers in support?
To testify in support on AB 88, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. To testify in support on AB 88, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, at this time, the line is open and working, but there are no more callers to testify in support on AB 88.
Thank you very
Chair,
much.
I apologize. One caller just raised their hand. May I cue them up?
Absolutely.
Caller with the last three digits, 101. Please press *6 now to unmute. You will have 2 minutes. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record, and you may begin.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Lori Tom, Lauriethom. I'm a citizen of the Arrington Paiute Nation. I would like to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing forward AB 88. I'm speaking in support of this bill to make culturally respectful and safe learning environments for our children and others in our great state. Historical trauma is real. It lives in the lives of our Indigenous people here in Nevada. As a past high school athlete, I played and attended athletic events that reinforced negative stereotypes of our Indigenous people. From adults spitting on young Native athletes, doing extra or seeing entire gyms full of non-natives doing the tomahawk chop, but still yelling at us for the dirty Indians to go home to the res. It is difficult for Indigenous parents to raise well-rounded Indigenous children in a world that refuses to see that their racist acts are hurtful and derogatory. I support this bill in a personal nature because I would like to make sure that Nevada is respectful of our Indigenous people and that our children have a good future. So as Nevada leaders, I ask that you vote in support of AB 88 and support this catalyst of positive change for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tom. And, I'm sorry, Assemblyman Flores?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say to Lori Tom, thank you for all the work you do on behalf of so many natives here in the state of Nevada. It's always an honor and pleasure to hear from you.
Thank you. BPS, do we have any more callers in support?
Sure. At this time, the line is open and working. However, there are no more callers in support of AB 88.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to hear testimony in opposition. Do we have any callers in opposition of AB 88?
To testify in opposition on AB 88, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. We are currently on opposition on AB 88. To take your place in the queue, please press *9 now. Chair, at this time, the line is open and working, but there are no callers in opposition on AB 88.
Thank you very much. We will move on to neutral. Is there anyone wishing to testify who is neutral on this bill?
To testify in neutral on AB 88, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. To testify in neutral on AB 88, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working. However, there are no callers in neutral on AB 88 at this time.
Okay, thank you. Assemblyman Watts, did you have any closing remarks you wanted to make to the committee? Although I believe that all the folks calling in support did an excellent job.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Howard Watts for the record. I agree. I think the people who called in and provided testimony and support said it better than I ever could. And clearly this is a complicated issue. And I think Assembly Bill 88 is a very positive first step in addressing that issue in a positive and constructive way. So again, I noted this in my initial remarks, but I believe that we can confront our history, that we can preserve our history, and that we can make history when we pass Assembly Bill 88, and I urge the committee's support. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Assemblyman. And with that, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 88. Before we go to the next agenda item, which is public comment, I'd like to remind those present that the period of public comment is an opportunity to discuss general matters that fall within the purview of this committee. You will have 2 minutes, so please clearly state and spell your name and keep it as close to 2 minutes as you can. Staff in BPS, please add the first caller with public comment to the meeting if there is any.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to make public comment today, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. In order to make public comment for this meeting, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working. However, there are no callers for public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments from the members before we adjourn? Taking a look, I don't see any. Okay, so we will adjourn now. Our next meeting will be Thursday, March 11th at 1:30, and this concludes our meeting for the day. Meeting is adjourned.